Any more cars? Hello everybody and welcome back to Tabletop Archives, where I, Frank, give you world building tips for your own homebrew campaigns in Dungeons & Dragons. Today we're going to be talking about factions, how to make them interesting, how to make them to where your players want to be involved in those factions or at the very least interact with them, and also how to make them screw over your players. That's my favorite part. What I'm not going to be going over is like what kind of factions you should make, your thieves guilds, your mage guilds. I feel like most of that is stuff we already know. We already understand that there should probably be a Town's Guard or a mage academy of some kind. That stuff I assume you already have handled. It's how to make those factions themselves more dynamic, more interesting, and more importantly, fit into the story. I think we've all been guilty of making a faction, hoping the players would interact with it, and then them not interact with it because it was... So when I'm usually starting off my faction, I've already come up with an idea of the faction, whether it's a thieves guild or some sort of mage society, a cult perhaps. I've already come up with like what they would classify themselves as, their names, stuff like that. But once that starts to be figured out, I also start to figure out what is a goal that they're trying to achieve. The goal can be something as simple as wanting to get money, a thieves guild wanting to get money. Could be something a little bit more heavy, like trying to bring back a long dead god that wants to take over the world. It could be something very complex, like trying to get a specific government system in place instead of another one. Find out what your goal is for the faction, and that's going to be able to build you a nice foundation for what you need to do. Again, in my world building, what I tend to do is come up with a setting and come up with a tension for that setting. So advancement versus contentment. Do we want to keep pushing and striving for the new thing, or should we be fine with where we are? That's a tension that I'll build into the setting itself, and I do that by having the faction lie somewhere in that tension. So for example, is the Mage Guild wanting to push the boundaries of magic more and more, or are they content and actually don't want anyone going further because it's unknown magics, it's forbidden magics, and there's a reason that's the case. Come up with whatever tension you want it to be, and then just basically adjust it on the slider where that group would belong. Sure, you're going to occasionally have a thieves guild that doesn't make sense. Where does it belong in the advancement versus contentment? But you might put them right in the middle of that tension, and that's perfectly fine. It's okay to have things in the middle, but find that goal for that group. Now, once you've set that goal, I recommend also figuring out how much does that goal matter to them. Where's the line? At what point would the group itself say, you know what, we usually do this goal, but we're not going to do this because of, give your reason. So we would all agree that a thieves guild that's just out for making money probably doesn't care if individuals get hurt along the way, if they steal from people. Their morals are going to be lower, but the second you start affecting the group, then they'll care. Sure, Steve the NPC might have got stabbed by one of the guild members. They're not going to care. But what they will care about is the fact that a monster is going to come and destroy their hideout. Perhaps this thieves guild actually does care about the people. Maybe they're a Robin Hood type situation where they're stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. So who they steal from is just as important. It could even be something as simple as, we will do anything for money except politics, because we don't want to get involved in politics. Develop that goal, preferably on attention if you're using my method. Develop that goal, and then find out what's going to cause them to bend and break away from that goal. Okay, so we have the goals, we have the morals. Now we need to have what's needed in every single group, and that is people, NPCs, members, whatever you want to call them. You don't need to flesh out 10 to 20 different members, you only need a handful, and honestly, most of them can be in reserve. When I come up with a faction, I come up with the leader of the faction, the recognizable face, the person who's driving the faction to do something towards its goal. I come up with someone that the party's going to interact with the most. It could be the leader, it could not be, but I would come up with that. I come up with an antagonist, not necessarily towards the party, but that could be the case. More so a person that is not a fan of how things are being run at that moment. And then at that point, I just figure out, is there any other important NPCs I might want to throw in there, like a twist NPC, like this person was a part of the Thieves Guild all along? Do I want to throw in a bad guy in there to inevitably have that reveal later? I don't know, but those three at least are what I plan around. By planning around those three, and make it to where the party soon gets interacted into the faction, and there's already a little bit of drama going on there. If you have this leader who's again pushing towards the goal of the group, so this Thieves Guild leader who's doing everything in his power to make sure the Thieves Guild can get money, that's what they're doing. But there might be the one guy who's like, yeah, we could, but if we really got involved with the king, became his own assassins, we could make even more money. Or perhaps it's a guy who's saying, we're taking this too far, they need to not be in control anymore, I need to take over. By having the leader and an antagonist who does not agree with the leader, it makes things far more interesting. And then you get to have the one person that the party's going to most likely know. It could be the person on the corner who just introduces the party to the guild and they become the confidant. It could be a higher ranking member, someone on like a council who the party can have a familiar aspect with. Regardless, have the party know that person. And there's some cheats that we're going to get into on how you can make that so. By having individual members in the group that don't fully agree with the group consensus, that's where you can start to get some interesting ideas. That's not to say every faction should have infighting. Probably the smaller factions are going to be more cohesive. So that's your quick way of making factions. Simple and done. But how do we get the players to interact with the factions and, more importantly, care? It's very simple. Tie the faction to the players. That's really it. And you can do this in a number of ways. Perhaps a player is giving you a backstory of how they were a part of a Thieves Guild. Boom, done. There's your interaction with the Thieves Guild. Perhaps a player has said that they have an older brother who went into magic. That older brother can be part of the Mage Guild that we talked about. And now that's not only a emotional connection for the character, but also you have a confidant that the players know and can interact with. Now maybe your characters just gave you a blank slate and you're not entirely sure what to do. You can still have the faction connect to the players. Have them show up and have them, whatever they're looking for, whether it's a person, place, or thing, be tied to the faction. More than likely, the players are always looking for something. If they decided to go do a different continent, there's usually a reason. Maybe they find this aspect more interesting. Find a way to tie the faction into that thing. For example, if you are having a war plot and your players want to get heavily invested in the war, have a faction involved in the war. Maybe they're specifically taking one side, maybe they want to stay neutral and they're not sure which side they're taking as of yet, or maybe they just don't want to be involved in the war at all. For example, there could be a mercenaries group that's like totally down for being in war. They just want to know who's going to pay them more. Maybe there's a group of rangers who are deciding we don't want to be a part of this and we're not going to affiliate with anyone who is. Find a way to connect the faction by either having someone from their backstory, have the faction be from the backstory, or by having it be involved in the story. This is how you're going to be able to get the factions to be more involved with the players. I had to recently come up with a Blood Hunter order because one of my players wanted to dip into Blood Hunter. We both talked about the fact that we wanted it to be a natural progression, and he also in his backstory, he had a person who was part of that Blood Hunter order. So that's their confidant, that was their person that the party could know, and she was willing to talk to the party a little bit more, guide them. Once a specific plot detail was told to her, she's like, okay, we need to go to my group immediately. And that's how they were introduced to the group. And she was batting for them all the time. She tried to make sure that they could get brought up in the process quicker than anyone else could. As their confidant, she was not only willing to talk to them about anything, questions they had, but she was also willing to do anything for them. That brought them to their leader, who was willing to listen and willing to hear out what the party had to say, but also cared about the goals. Being a Blood Hunter order, they cared about defeating evil. So as long as the party lined up with their morals and goals, he didn't care whether or not they joined and moved up quickly or not. But then I introduced an antagonist, this guy who had been a part of the group for about 10 years, getting a little frustrated that this new group in less than a week are already moving up to the same rank as him. He's going to be mad at the leader because of how quickly the leader's allowing people to move up in the group, as more importantly, people who aren't him move up in the group. So he's the antagonist. He's the one who is both antagonistic towards the leader, but in a lesser way because of how the hierarchy works out. But he's also very antagonistic towards the players because he's mad that they're moving up in the ranks so quickly. And let me tell you, my players did not like him immediately, which is perfect because that's exactly what I wanted. So now I have this faction that the party can keep going back to for resources or plot hooks, whatever reasons they may need. There's an emotional investment with some of the characters, whether that's a good reason or a bad reason. And the party knows what their goals are. Whether or not the party aligns with those goals, that's not up to you. Or me in this case. But that's basically all you have to do to make factions a little bit more interesting, make them a little bit quicker, in my opinion. And also to make the party want to, care. Anyway, that is the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about how to make factions, and maybe I can do a follow-up video on that. Do you have any topics you want me to cover with your world building? Do you want me to not do world building stuff and go into other things? Let me know. Tell me. And then tell your friends as well. Please, that'd be awesome. Anyway, it's just me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time. Again, it's just me. I don't know why I'm saying we.